Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the thriller suspense films from 2024, titled So Torn. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie opens with a montage of scenes. The first one shows a woman on the verge of death, with a briefcase beside her. Another scene shows her handcuffed and bleeding to death, while the final scene shows her near a burning building. She narrates that it was all because of her choices. The scene then shifts to some time ago, and we meet the same woman, Barbara, who's a seamstress by profession. Her house is filled with strange embroidered portraits that play voice recordings when she pulls their threads. Most of them are recordings of her time with her mother, who passed away some time ago. Barbara, who still hasn't recovered from the grief, is looking after the fabric shop alone. She specializes in talking portraits, but we see that her store is barely visited by anyone. Later, she heads to the house of one of her customers, Grace, to stitch her wedding dress. Barbara is a mobile seamstress, which means she goes house to house with her sewing kit. Upon reaching, she proceeds to stitch a button on Grace's wedding dress, but ends up dropping it when Grace opens her sewing kit without permission. The button rolls near a floor vent, and Barbara goes to pick it up, but since the woman angered her earlier, she deliberately pushes it down. She makes it look like the button accidentally fell, and assures her customer that she has a spare one at her shop. Grace is furious because her wedding is in a few hours, but Barbara puts a safety pin to hold the dress, before rushing out of there. She gets inside her car and goes to get the spare button, taking a different route than usual. But after driving for a while, Barbara comes across a horrific accident scene. Two motorcycles have crashed, and there are traces of drugs along with guns on the ground. There is also a large briefcase that catches her attention. The riders are seriously injured, but they're still trying to fight against each other. Barbara is left in complete shock, and thinks about informing the authorities. But then, she changes her mind and comes up with a genius plan instead. She brings out her sewing kit, unwinds two rolls, and loops them around her car. Barbara then takes the same two threads, and carefully wraps them around the injured men. She makes sure to loop around the guns as well, and drags one of the motorcyclists on the other side of the road. After she's done, Barbara gets inside her car and drives away, pulling the threads behind her. Surprisingly, it creates a sort of system that ends up yanking both the guns towards the injured riders. The riders shoot at each other, seemingly killing them both. Up next, Barbara reverses her car, grabs the briefcase, and bolts away from there. She's ecstatic that she outsmarted the goons and snatched away their prize money. But upon reaching a bit further, Barbara realizes the threads are still hanging behind her car. She quickly stops, and finds out that one of the needles she used earlier is missing. Since it has her store's name, she panics and immediately returns to the crime scene. She fortunately finds the needle, which is lodged in one of the man's hands. Barbara tries to pull it out, but ends up dropping it on the road. She begins looking for it, when one of the men suddenly awakens, and tries to reach for his gun. But Barbara grabs the gun first, putting her fingerprints all over it. Now that she's also a part of the crime scene, a panicked Barbara throws away the guns. She also loads the injured man in her car, and drives away from there. But we see that her needle is still on the road. Upon reaching her store, Barbara discreetly drags the injured man, whose name is Beck, inside and ties up his hands and legs with threads. She then uses her knowledge of sewing machines, knots, and ropes to create an improvised pulley, which helps her drag the man upstairs.
Help! Help!
Just as Barbara breathes a sigh of relief, someone arrives at the door, and Beck tries to scream for help, so she shoves some cloth inside his helmet before rushing downstairs. It turns out to be a furious Grace, who's already late for her wedding. She demands that her dress be fixed immediately, so Barbara quickly sews a button, and sends her away. After rushing back up, she removes the gag from Beck, so he wastes no time and says that they're in danger, because the father of the boy whom he just shot will come for them. Just then, there's a sudden knock downstairs, and it turns out to be one of Barbara's students named Oscar. He's a kind old man who's making a talking quilt for his wife, and wants Barbara's help finishing it. However, the panicked woman tells him he just can't enter without an appointment. In the meantime, Beck tries to call for help, but the gag on his mouth makes it impossible to shout. He then crawls using the rope he's tied to, and somehow manages to reach the briefcase. Up next, Beck moves towards the stairs, and throws the briefcase down to attract the visitor's attention, but Barbara has already sent the old man out. With the danger narrowly averted, she quickly plans her next move. Barbara uses her extensive knowledge of sewing to attach the gun on the door, and also Beck. She makes loops, and connects them in different places in the house. After she's done, Barbara waits behind the counter with the briefcase, while an armed man named Hudson pulls over outside the house. As soon as he opens the door, the thread mechanism activates, and his hand with the gun is yanked above. Beck also falls down the stairs with his gun and readies to shoot, but there are no bullets, and this gives Hudson enough time to free his hand and shoot Beck dead. Realizing her plan has failed, Barbara bolts away from the house with the briefcase in hand. She starts running through the woods, but Hudson subdues her with a shot to the leg. He then grabs one of her thread rolls, and brutally chokes her with it, until she goes limp. After this, Hudson opens the briefcase, which shockingly has millions in cash, and begins loading it into another bag. He also finds that there's a bomb underneath the last stack of cash, so he lets it be and takes off with the remaining money. Barbara, meanwhile, is on the verge of death, reconsidering her choices. The scene then shifts, and we are taken back to when Barbara had just witnessed the bike accident. This time, she doesn't do anything crazy and simply calls the police. Shortly after, an old cop, who's also a wedding officiator, named Ms. Engel arrives, and starts inspecting the crime scene. When she notices drugs on the road, she immediately realizes there's money involved. The old woman then inspects Barbara's car, and eventually finds the briefcase in her trunk. Furious, she scolds her for trying something like this, and hesitantly tells her to get out of the car. Ms. Engel also asks Barbara to carry her sewing kit, as her robe needs some stitching. Following this, she drives everyone to the police station, and handcuffs them. Barbara is also cuffed, but she's allowed to move much freely, so she can sew the torn rope. The old cop then interrogates the men about what happened. Beck doesn't say a word, but the other guy, Joshua, reluctantly blurts out that his father had sent him. He was supposed to deliver the drugs, but chickened out at the last moment. Joshua claims that his brutal father is now coming straight to the station to kill them all. However, Ms. Engel doesn't take the threat seriously, and says she gotta officiate a wedding. She then heads to the other room, and we learn that it's none other than Grace's wedding. Once they are alone, a panicked Barbara immediately starts looking for ways to escape. She sees that the keys are on the table, but they're too far to reach, so she tells Beck to open his belt, and tie them together with his shoelaces to make an improvised rope. He complies right away, and Barbara also starts preparing a blow dart out of paper. Before they begin, she demands that Beck let her escape, and also that they split the money. Beck hesitantly obliges, and begins throwing his belt towards the table. Inside the wedding hall, Grace's safety pin has been undone, and it's now scraping her backside. She's having a real hard time focusing on the wedding due to the pain. Elsewhere, after several tries, Beck finally manages to land the belt in the correct position, and Barbara skillfully hooks it to the keys with her blow dart. Now, he will have to slowly pull the belt to his side. Back at Grace, she's had enough and crashes out at her own wedding. Ms. Engel is stunned to see her bloodied back, but says she has a person who can fix it right away. She then goes to the other room, forcing Beck and Barbara to abort the mission and quickly hide the belt. Ms. Engel takes the keys, uncuffs Barbara, and takes her to the other room to fix Grace's dress. However, the arrogant woman is stunned to see Barbara again, but she lets her work for the sake of her wedding. Once it's done, Barbara is returned to her position, and Ms. Engel hangs the keys on a rack, further away from their reach. Soon after she leaves, Barbara tells Beck to throw his belt at the rack. It's a much difficult task, but after some attempts, he manages to get it done. Barbara also does her blow dart thing several times, and Beck finally manages to retrieve the keys. He immediately frees himself, but when it's Barbara's turn, he refuses to give her the keys and instead throws them away. The poor woman just watches as Beck grabs the briefcase and crawls out of the station. Soon, fury takes over, and Barbara rips out the wires in the wall. She uses it to try and locate the keys, but to no avail. With no options left, Barbara and Joshua engage in some chit-chat, where they talk about their lives. But amidst this, she notices an electric socket, which gives her an idea. She first strips the wire, then uses her blow dart and threads to form a pulley. Up next, she carefully connects the wire to the socket. But this is when Hudson shows up at the station, and enters through the wedding hall. He shoots Ms. Engel in the leg, and then barges into the other room, forcing Barbara to drop the wire. Hudson sees his loser son in the corner, but decides to go after Barbara first. He begins taunting her like it's something personal. During this time, Ms. Engel crawls to the room, and Barbara discreetly signals at her to plug in the wire. The old woman uses all of her strength to do so, and as soon as the current hits the wire, Barbara grabs the other end and sticks it into Hudson, causing him to knock out, but he inadvertently shoots Barbara 3 times in the gut. This leaves her on the verge of death once again, while handcuffed. The scene shifts, and we are taken to the accident site once again, but here Barbara doesn't want any trouble, so she neither stops for the briefcase, nor calls the cops. She simply speeds away from there until she reaches home. But when she notices the sign going out of business outside her store, a fire burns inside her, and she realizes she needs the cash. She then rushes back towards the site, only to find Hudson shooting Beck dead. Panicked, Barbara immediately turns her car around and flees the scene, while Hudson loads his son in the car. After driving for a while, Barbara exits the car, and goes inside a restaurant with her sewing kit. But Hudson, who had been tailing her, also arrives with his son, and sits next to her. He immediately whips out his gun, and places it on his lap to intimidate her. The waitress soon arrives, and Hudson orders lunch for them, saying they're a family. She notices that Joshua is injured, but Hudson insists that he's fine, and sends her away. Once alone, Hudson threatens Barbara, urging her to forget whatever she saw earlier. He wants her to pretend like they're a family, and nothing else. Hudson also says he can't take Joshua to the hospital, so he orders her to stitch him up in the restroom. Terrified, Barbara agrees, and takes Joshua to the restroom. Meanwhile, Oscar arrives at the restaurant with his quilt, as he spotted Barbara's car. Hudson claims she's not here, but Oscar doesn't believe it and sits next to him. He then starts yapping nonstop about his talking quilt. Inside, Barbara begins stitching up the injured guy, during which they have an emotional conversation. She then gives him a roll of thread, telling him to hold onto it no matter what. Meanwhile, Oscar notices blood trails leading to the restroom, which makes him realize something's wrong. He immediately rushes to the door, only to find Barbara with the injured strange man. Barbara stated that her cousin got into an accident, so she was cleaning up his wounds. Hearing this, Oscar feels like he barged in at the wrong time, so he awkwardly says goodbye and leaves. Now that they're alone again, Hudson goes in on his son, and asks why he ran. Joshua claims he got scared when the buyer started shooting at him, but Hudson knows that's a lie. He reveals that he checked Joshua's gun, and found a nearly empty magazine. This means that he shot at the buyer first, and was trying to run away with the money. Meanwhile, Barbara has already begun working on her plan. As Hudson is engaged in conversation, she's slowly using Joshua's thread to create a network of loops that ties Hudson's table, his shoe, and even his gun. Back at Hudson, he hands his knife to Joshua, and tells him to kill Barbara if he wants to be forgiven. The boy expectedly refuses, but Hudson keeps on insisting. At this intense moment, Barbara suddenly gets up from her chair, opens her sewing kit, which activates a song, and starts dancing like a maniac. Hudson is amused by her performance, but in reality, it's all a trick, as Barbara is using her steps to weave the thread roll in the surroundings. After a while, Hudson eventually stops the music, and Barbara returns to her seat again. She then makes some more loops around Hudson's shoe and pants, and tosses the roll to Joshua underneath the table. But then, A furious and bloodied Grace shows up at the restaurant looking for Barbara. Hudson claims it's not a good time, but the angry woman shuts him up, and forcibly takes Barbara outside. The latter hesitantly gets to work with the button, while Hudson watches her from the window. After the work is done, Grace drives away, and Barbara is left all alone outside. Here she signals to Joshua to start the act, after which he pulls both rolls of thread, and this immediately yanks away Hudson's gun, and it starts dancing around the chairs and tables. In the end, the gun is pointed directly at Hudson, and Joshua pulls the trigger several times, killing him on the spot. Now that she's no longer in danger, Barbara immediately grabs the briefcase from Hudson's car and flees the scene. When Joshua notices this, he becomes worried, so he crawls out of the restaurant, and gets inside his dad's car. Elsewhere, Barbara has reached home with the briefcase, and she cracks it open with a tool. When she notices the stacks of cash, she begins storing them in her drawer with tears in her eyes. But unfortunately, she accidentally detonates the bomb and the house is engulfed in flames. Joshua also arrives at the scene, but he can only watch as a badly injured Barbara crawls out of the house. Even in this timeline, she's about to die. Following this, the scene shifts back to when Barbara was at Grace's house to fix her dress. She accidentally drops the button, but chooses to pick it up this time. Barbara then sews it on the dress, and finishes Grace's chapter for good. Because she doesn't have to hurry now, she takes her usual route, which is opposite to where the accident took place. Unfortunately, after driving for a while, she's stopped by an armed man who turns out to be none other than Hudson. He demands to know the directions to a certain place, and she hesitantly points it. Hudson then surprisingly throws in a few stacks of money inside her car, and asks her to forget about this encounter, before driving away from there. Barbara is overjoyed by the sudden turn of events. Finally, her choice is paid off. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.